Memphis is here because of our groundwater.
Without further ado, we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the program, and I would like to introduce all of us to somebody you've probably seen many times before, who's been very involved with this research for a long, long time, and that is Dr. Brian Waldron of Caesar. So I'd like to introduce him and kick off the rest of this program.
Well, again, I want to thank you for coming. This is fabulous to see so many people here interested in our groundwater supply. Today, we'll be talking about our kickoff project that you've been hearing so much about recently. So we'll get into that. And again, thank you, International Paper, for your generosity in this effort. So Memphis has had its fair share of issues when we're looking at water. Memphis used to get its drinking water from the Wolf River, not from underground. And in the mid-1800s to late 1800s, we were plagued with a number of yellow fever epidemics. And it was really the yellow fever epidemic of 1878 that was the worst. We had 5,000 deaths, 17,000 cases, and 20,000 people fled the city of Memphis. Back then, 20,000 people was half the population. So it was so bad that the city of Memphis lost its charter, meaning we were no longer a city. We were done, according to the state. Well, about 8 years later, R.C. Graves, who owned the Bowling Hughes Ice Company downtown, decided to find another water source. So he decided to drill a well. Now remember, we used to get our water from the Wolf River. He drilled a well, and he drilled a deep one. We don't know why, but thankfully he did, because by drilling that well, he went through a very thick clay layer and hit and discovered the Memphis Aquifer. And that aquifer at the time was under so much pressure that the water erupted up to the surface and flowed on the ground for days. About 7 years later, Memphis regained its charter as a city, and we are here today, and I can guarantee you why Memphis is here because of our groundwater. That's why we exist today. So we regained our charter from that. Well, how did we get this great resource? About 65 million years ago, tectonic forces in the region caused the land surface to subside. This allowed the ocean to wash inland to as far north as the southern tip of Illinois, depositing layers of sand and clay into an area that we call the Mississippi Embayment, highlighted in blue. It underlies portions of 8 states. The majority of that coverage is under Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas. If you were to look at it underneath the ground, it would form a bowl-like trough that widens and deepens as it goes toward the Gulf of Mexico, and the axis of it, the middle of it, parallels that of the Mississippi River. So if we kind of cut a line right across it from east to west, this is what it would look like, where our aquifers in blue are separated by layers of clay and gray. And the 3 primary aquifers that we look at, one is called, for lack of any better term, the shallow aquifer. So we try to keep it simple. The shallow aquifer, the one beneath that, is not the deep aquifer, nor the deeper, but it is called the Memphis Aquifer. It's rather thick. Beneath your feet right here, it's about 700 feet thick, and that is 2 Clark Towers standing on top of each other, comprised of sand. Then the one beneath that, takes about 1,000 feet to get to it, is the Fort Pillow Sand. It's only 100 to 200 feet thick. But the one that's most important to us that we're talking about today is the Memphis Aquifer. And above that is this clay layer. And where that clay layer exists, if there is a contaminant, that contaminant will go into that shallow groundwater system, the shallow aquifer, but it'll hit the clay and stop. Yay, we like the clay. So, the contaminant stops, but what happens is, in Shelby County, there are naturally occurring breaches in the confining clay that, when there is a contaminant, that can bypass the protective nature of the clay and get into our drinking water supply. So it's very important that we understand through this study, which is what we're focusing on, these breaches. Where are they located? What's their size? How's the water getting through it? What's the quality of that water? and to really look at what we do on the land surface. If we were to look at Shelby County, you'll see the municipalities in colors of shades of green. There are some red areas. There are 16 of them. That means that there are 16 known or suspected breaches in the protective clay layer in Shelby County that we know of so far. Do we think that there are more? Yes. So part of this study is also to go and find them. So if we, on the gray area, the hatched area, out to the east, along the eastern edge of Fayette County, or Shelby County, and going into Fayette County is the recharge zone. This is where the clay goes away. The clay is just gone. And our groundwater is replenished by rainfall. So every time it rains, my kids complain, but I'm like, oh man, the aquifer's being recharged today. Oh, Dad, you're so dumb. But whatever. I also tell them to turn off the water. I'm like, you're draining the aquifer. But anyways, that's what you get. That's where the recharge area is, and that's the quantity side. So when we look at the generous funding that IP is giving, and we're hoping to go and approach other companies, that's going to be addressing the quantity side. Here we're addressing the quality side. So this way we'll get both sides of the coin. So back to the shallow aquifer. We know that it's not protected by clay, therefore it is contaminated in a variety of locations, not everywhere. This is where we know contamination to occur, where the black dots are. The pink dots is where Caesar has gone out near some of the well fields and identified additional potential sources of contamination. So it is very important that we look at what we're doing on the land surface in respect to where these breaches are located so we can understand the impact to our drinking water supply. Man, Sarah, go.
We're just playing tag team back and forth. Okay, so Dale did a really good job of kind of teeing this up, but we wanted to just show a brief 5-6 minute video to kind of explain not only how we got to this point, how we got these research dollars, like he kind of said, but also what is this research? What are we trying to accomplish, and what can we do with it?
So what we like to do is delve into the study and just talk a little bit about that. First, we're bringing some of the brightest minds here to look at this. We're bringing in about 25 scientists from all around the world. They're graduate students. Again, we're not an engineering firm, we're not a consulting firm, we're a university. So we deal with students and also faculty experts, not only at the University of Memphis, but elsewhere. So when we think about what we're going to do, this is our first public forum. How do we go about doing it? How do we pick the projects? Well, we have a structure. First, we go after low-hanging fruit. Where do we know a lot of information, but we're missing just a little bit? Here is a case with, for hot. Yes. This is a case down in southwest Memphis where you see the industries along President's Island, location of TVA. We know that there are breaches in this location, but we also know that the Mississippi River moved back and forth across this area, and therefore we suspect that there are possibly more breaches due to that. Another step that we use is to identify foundational projects. Well, we can go ahead and put out some instrumentation now so that in the future we'll have some data. This is a case in Hickory Hill. This is one of the well fields near Hickory Hill where that shallow aquifer, the water in it is gone. It went dry. That water leaked through the breaches in that area into the Memphis Aquifer. They're now dry. And now when the wells turn on, the water in the Memphis Aquifer starts to desaturate, starts to go away because it's what we call unconfined. It's not a very good case. But what we're going to do is we're going to put instrumentation here now so that in 2020, when a student walks in the door, there's data to back them up. And then another third one is critical areas over less critical. These may be some that Caesar recognizes, could be some that MLGW, could be some that the Sierra Club recognizes. And this is a case where by the University of Memphis, Custom Cleaners, some of y'all have heard about that in the news, it's now a Superfund site. Has a very high level of contamination, 1,000 times greater than what the Environmental Protection Agency claims is safe. And it is only 3/4 of a mile from one of the well fields. And the last one is timing of professional hires. As I mentioned, we are the University of Memphis. We're not an engineering firm. Therefore, we hire graduate students, masters and PhDs. We're looking at bringing in at least 25 of them just on this effort. That's 25 really great brains working on this. And PhDs, they take longer. They take 3 to 4 years, so you got to start them now. You can't start them in year 4. So there's some timing. So we have initiated 5 investigations in 2018, starting in September, and we will start 11 more in fall of 2019. So we are just kicking right into gear. So we're going to talk about the 5 investigations, and then that will put us into some question and answers. So the first one is investigating known and suspected breaches on President's Island and Pigeon Forge. This is one that we saw before. The area under investigation is outlined in a black dashed area. It's being conducted by Rizwan, and he is from Bangladesh. It impacts Council Districts 6 and 8, 2 MLGW well fields, Davis and Allen. There are no longer one probable. That one probable became a known. So we now have 2 known breaches and 1 potential. We are receiving support from EDGE, City of Memphis, and the Memphis Port Commission, and we'll be starting that this spring and summer. What we're going to do is we need to find the breaches, but they're underground, so how do you do that? We use ground penetrating radar. That's the one on the left. It's like a lawnmower, but it doesn't make that kind of sound. It's kind of silent. Anyways, it's like a lawnmower. You just push it along the ground, and it sends energy into the ground, and what bounces back is a picture of what we can see where there are potential breaches in the area. So this way we can roll this thing along the ground and map where holes are in that clay layer. The second one is looking at, by the University of Memphis, the Sheehan well field with that custom cleaner site. How is the water getting in? What are the potential breaches in the area, and what impact are they going to have on this? This is being conducted by Hugo. He is from Guadalajara, Mexico. It impacts Council Districts 4, 5, 8, and 9. Only 1 well field, Sheehan. There's 1 known breach, 1 probable, and 1 potential. We're receiving additional support from TDAC, from the state, and EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and it's going to be conducted spring and fall. The second one is finding some properties for the aquifer. Now, we have these, but when we kind of go back in history and look to see how they were calculated, they weren't always the greatest. So we want to get better values. We want to be pretty sure of what values we're looking at, and we'll avoid the situation of bad data in equals bad information coming back out. This is being conducted by Sophia. She's also from Mexico. It impacts Council Districts 1, 2, 5, 7, and 9. It impacts MLGW well fields Allen, Davis, Mallory, McCord, Morton, and Sheehan, so a lot of them. We are actually doing this right now. She's been out in the field for the last 2-3 weeks with others, her colleagues, and we're going out again this week to another well field. She's looking at 2 things. Hydraulic conductivity is one of them. What it means is the smaller the value, the slower the water goes. The higher the value, well, it's not the lawnmower, but the faster it goes through the ground. The other one is storage. Both of these help in our modeling. Storage, the smaller the value, the farther away that well has an influence. The farther away that well has to pull water in to bring it to itself. But the bigger the value, it's a lot closer and you can grab it right there. And that's what we're seeing in Lichterman, where it just grabs it right out of the pore space, right in between the sands, takes it right out. These are very important for modeling, and by getting it right now, getting the values right, we'll do much better understanding. A fourth one is to investigate the connection between the Wolf River and the shallow aquifer to identify new breaches. Remember, I said there were 16 known or suspected, and then I presented the bad news that we think there's more out there. Well, this is getting to it where we're going to try to find some new ones, and we're going to use the Wolf River as a proxy. This is being conducted by Sagar. He is from Nepal. It impacts council districts 4, 5, 8, and 9. I mention that because I hope you know what council district you're in, because it's important to relay back to them that you're interested in what goes on with this study. It impacts 2 MLGW well fields, McCord and Mallory. There's 1 no breach, and we expect there to be more. We are receiving some additional support from or assistance from the Wolf River Conservancy and the City of Memphis, and it will be starting this summer. What we see up here are 2 pictures. The one on the left is what we call normal, and the one on the right we call abnormal. So normal on the left is during the summertime, it's not raining, right? It hasn't rained for like 3 weeks, and you go over the Wolf River and there's water. You're like, well, what's up with that? At least I asked that question. And you know, there's this water flowing in the river. There hasn't been any rain. That is because groundwater is feeding the river. And what happens when there is a breach nearby, the abnormal on the right, there's still water flowing in the river, but it's losing. And it's losing water to the groundwater, and it's going through that breach and into our Memphis Aquifer. So what we want to do is we want to find what's on the right. So what we do is a step-by-step process. One of them is using a seepage meter. I think we have one in the back. These are handmade. It's the cheaper option. They cost $7 a pop. We build them ourselves. And thank you, Lowe's, for all the 300 buckets we're going to come and take. But if you need a bucket, you better get tonight, because we're going Wednesday. Wednesday shopping day. So we'll be getting a bunch of buckets, and what we do is we put these in the riverbed. We sink them into the water, and over about 30 minutes to an hour, there will be a bag on top, and it will fill up if groundwater is coming up, or the bag will lose or shrink as the river loses water near a breach. So we look at that, and we'll be able to identify where there are potential losses along the Wolf River. This is the cheap option, which then puts us toward the a little bit more expensive but time-consuming option, which is using some very special devices, some that are in the back, to measure actual discharge in the river. So where we see that there is again a loss and it matches up, we go to the third and most expensive option, which is drilling wells. Where we'll go in and we'll drill wells off the bank and into the land to actually look at the movement of water from the river into the aquifer system. So this is the step process that we use. The last project that we're looking at is looking at the optimal pumping regimes for minimizing contaminants getting into the groundwater, damaging the aquifer, and extending the life of our well fields. If we can extend the life of our well fields and prevent contamination, our water bills will stay lower. In order to do this, we are going to run thousands of possibilities. If you think about all the different kind of caveats that may impact it, I'll show you some. You have to run thousands of iterations. So what we do is we're going to program this up and push it against a supercomputer that we have on campus to help us solve these pretty quick. This is one right here. We have seen that contaminated water tends to stay in the top part of the aquifer. Remember how thick the aquifer is? 700 feet thick about? So it stays in the upper 100 to 200 feet, it seems. So one scenario could be, well, if we drill deep wells, maybe we won't hit the contaminant. Maybe the contaminant won't impact us if we drill from the deep. Or maybe we do start drilling deep and it draws contaminants down from the top all the way through the thickness of the aquifer and into our wells. That wouldn't be good, so we want to test that. We could look at seasonality. One way is during the wintertime we use less water, right? But during the summer we got sprinklers, we got our pools, we're hot, the hose over the head. So we're using more water in the summer. But during the winter, when we're using less, maybe we don't pump from the shallow wells. The shallow wells are pulling that contaminant. Let's pump from the deep wells. Therefore, we can save our well fields and we can prevent damaging our aquifer system. We can extend the life. We could look at placement. We know these breaches exist. We know they're naturally occurring. We put a well near one of these breaches. How is that water getting in? We saw at Hickory Hill, one of the well fields, there's a well right near some of the breaches. And the shallow aquifer's gone dry, sucked it all in. So we're able to look at this. And another could be future development. Remember that listing of aquifers that we saw, the shallow aquifer, and then the Memphis, and then below that was the Fort Pillow? Well, that's the Fort Pillow down at the bottom. There's a clay layer that separates the Fort Pillow from the Memphis. And maybe we need to go really deep. Maybe in some circumstances, we need to drill wells down to the Fort Pillow and use that water. So these are a variety of possibilities that we have to run that takes thousands of iterations, and that's what we'll be working on. I did not mention this, but it being conducted by Shandapan, right here, waving his hand. He's so excited. 4 years. 4 years, yes. Woo! Aren't you glad to be a PhD student? So it impacts council districts 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And instead of listing the MLGW well fields, it impacts all of them. We're looking at every single one of them. And this is being conducted over the next 4 years. Thank you so much, Sean. That was fantastic. So we need your help. So yes, we have a great team of scientists. Yes, we're bringing students into the system. Yes, we have great faculty working on this. But but we do need your help from the public. One, stay informed. This is what Councilwoman Robinson was saying. You know, stay informed. Listen about these public events. We hope to be coming to your neighborhoods and libraries and community forums to be talking about what we're doing in between these public forums, and also share what you have here with others. You have a program. If you check the back, there are some things you can do at home. You know, if you're brushing your teeth, don't leave the water running. If you have a dishwasher, fill it all the way up. Things like that. Dispose of your waste. Remember the shallow aquifer with all the dots all over it? We want to avoid that. And we need 300 of these. This is bamboo, about 6 to 7 feet tall, ½ inch. If you have a bamboo forest in your backyard, or if your neighbor's bamboo is encroaching on your yard, I did not say that, but we need that bamboo. This is for the seepage meters. We bury these into the water so you can't see them, but we need to find them again in about an hour. So we will be putting flags on these and sticking them in the river, so as we canoe down, we can find them. So we need 300 of these, and we'll have some sign-up sheets in the back. I know you're thinking right now, oh, bamboo, yeah, I can finally get rid of that.
Wait, will you come and cut down the bamboo?
Scott has volunteered from the Sierra Club to come and cut down your bamboo. So, we also need help deploying equipment, these seepage meters, these buckets. We need 6 teams, and it will take us a long time to do it if we just did it ourselves. So we know that there are some canoe boating activists out there. I've reached out to Keith Cole with the Wolf River Conservancy, and they have agreed to volunteer their time to get us some folks to be on the river. We'll be doing this hopefully around June, and we have a sign-up sheet in the back, but also the Wolf River Conservancy will be leading the volunteer kind of rousing effort. We need people to help us on the river. We need some people on some boats to get out there. So, as we've said, you know, your water, your research, we need your help out in the field to do some of this. So, please consider helping. We'll put you with some of our students, but we need you to help find these bamboo canes in the river. And then also invite your friends and neighbors to the next public forum, which we're looking at in June. So we'll make that announcement once we kind of finalize the date, but it will be in June. We'll likely not be here. What we want to do is we want to move around the city. We want to make sure that we get as many citizens engaged and informed as possible. So we'll be moving these public forums around, and as I mentioned, we'll be visiting, you know, your libraries and your community groups as well to make sure we get a broad brush of people's engagement. So from there, we would be very happy to answer your questions.
Two questions. One is, by the Allen plant, I understand the water is now being supplied from the Davis well field, and that's only 1.5 miles away from the Allen plant. Is it worthwhile thinking about closing that as an access point for water? I know that's an MLGW question, but that's my first question. My second question is, in doing the research, do you want to consider places where there are major contamination sources on the surface level and see if there's breaches near there? Is that another important thing to look at, like the clothing place near the University of Memphis?
Oh, you mean custom cleaners?
Yes.
Yeah, the custom cleaning.
Sure, I'll go ahead and do the first one. My name is Dan Larson, and the problem that we're addressing there at the Davis well field really requires more information. I would not want to recommend anything with regard to that until we've done quite a bit more work out there. We've done some studies there, we've done some studies at TVA, but there's still so many unknowns at this point, and I don't feel like there's concern, but there's not an immediate issue that I would say that would require any action.
So the second question was pertaining to, in our scenarios of picking sites, would we want to pick sites where there is no contamination, like at the University of Memphis? And yes, that's that third scenario where if there are hotspot areas that we're aware of, then yes, we definitely want to be targeting those. So yes.
Early in the slideshow, you had a stratigraphic section up that showed also the Fort Pillow, and I believe the Cretaceous aquifer is deeper. Are those too deep to be economical, and how is the water quality compared between the two aquifers?
Okay, I'll take that one too. Yeah, that's sort of my area. The issue with the Cretaceous aquifer, we call it the McNary aquifer, is that it's a saline water aquifer. It actually has some interesting characteristics, but they're interesting from a geological standpoint and not in your faucet. Okay, so yeah, it's definitely an undesirable resource. The deepest, really good fresh water is going to come out of the Fort Pillow. That's it. So that's what we have: Memphis Aquifer and Fort Pillow Aquifer. Use it wisely.
Go ahead.
Is it possible to seal the breaches in any manner?
No, it's not possible to seal them. They occur naturally, either through ancient channel deposits eroding through the confining unit. So there's no real way to seal them up. Well, my name is Scott Schaefnacher. I'm the Associate Director of Water for Caesar.
Okay, my question is about the funding. It was indicated that the City Council approved 5 years at 1%. I think that's money well spent, and I understand also that IP is giving $500,000 for 3 years. But what's going to happen after that? Is there do you have to kind of reapply for additional funding based on what the findings are?
I would say yes. There's not a plan where there's direct continuation. So if we, through this investigation, continue to see that there's a need, we'll bring that before the public, which we'll be doing every year. We'll bring it before the City Council and MLGW. And at that point, a decision can be made. Do we continue that forward, or what do we do?
Okay.
Yes,
And another suggestion is that it seems like the Memphis City Zoo has a lot of bamboo.
I'm not going to tell you where I got the stick behind me. My mom said it was okay.
My question is, I was a volunteer working with Alabama Water Watch. We were testing Escherichia coli levels in the water. Is there any kind of volunteer work or anyone doing that kind of research with our Memphis water?
Oh, okay. So volunteer work, volunteer work, we have to be a little careful at the university with volunteers, just because we're a state agency, and there's always regulations, but it is possible to get involved in that. You don't have to be a student to work at the University of Memphis. We even have people that are going to school at the university that they're not taking enough hours, so they're just called temps. And we have a lot of temps. Some come from Rhodes College or other colleges around here. So if you are interested in getting involved, please let us know, and we'll look to make that happen, because we are looking for help for people going into the field outside of just what we're doing in the rivers. So thank you.
A while back, there was litigation between the state of Mississippi and, I guess, MLGW, but the ownership of the artesian well water, was it ever resolved? If so, how was it resolved?
You know, want to answer? I can answer that. We're not able, it's still under investigation. Thank you. We're not able to answer a lot of questions about that.
I've got much easier questions than that, much easier, so I'll be the softball ones. So I moved here from a place that got their water from the rivers. So the aquifer, yay, much cleaner source, yeah, than a river?
Yes, it is. The aquifer system is a much higher quality water going through quartz sand, like what you would see at the beach, versus what you would get out of a river. So it's a very high quality sand. It makes it great for companies who want to move here, because it doesn't cost a lot of money for them to pre-process that water. And then if they want to reuse it, which a lot of companies are trying to do, they're trying to reuse water. There's nothing in the water that really scales up the machinery, so they're able to use it like 10 times. So,
and I want to make sure, fantastic. I want to make sure I understood you on sustainability. So rainwater is sufficient in terms of replenishing the aquifers?
We do not know. That is the big question. We do not know if we are under current conditions of sustainability. So the generous gift that International Paper is giving, and if you reach out to other corporations, we'll be able to begin to answer that quantity side, which is that sustainability. So, yeah.
If we do exploratory drilling to try and find the breaches, do we risk contaminating even more?
Typically, when we drill down into the Memphis Aquifer, we usually double case the wells, so we have an outer core that sets into the confining unit, and then you drill a punch through it, so it keeps the interaction between the aquifers from happening. Where there are breaches, there's already a connection, because generally there's already a downward vertical gradient between the two aquifers. So the shallow aquifer is entering into the Memphis Aquifer.
So the contamination that's sitting on the bottom of the upper aquifer, when you push through it, are you loosening it up?
Not really. I mean, as long as the well construction is solid and good, there shouldn't be any problem with it.
Hey, a couple of questions. So, one, is it safe to assume that once the aquifer is contaminated, it will always be contaminated? And then follow-up question for that, what are the big causes of contamination that we see? Obviously, the Allen plant was a large cause, but that can't be all of the dots on the map.
Correct. So your first question, once it becomes contaminated, you can remediate that aquifer. There's a local company in town, InSafe, that's a large environmental firm, and they work a lot on remediation, but you cannot get it back to zero. So once it happens, you will have something lingering there. You can get it back to background levels, or to safer levels. As to more dots on the map, where are these contaminants coming from? Andrew Scott, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, typically you're looking at contamination from dry cleaner sites. Anything like a mom and pop site that would like custom cleaners, legacy sites, like the Memphis Depot, gas stations are another source of contamination. So they're around. Old landfills, that's another one. Shelby Farms, that leaks directly into the Memphis Aquifer at Shelby Farms. So yeah, there's plenty of sites around, but those are typically the culprits.
I have a question about the contamination. Is it like safe to drink water here? Or is it, do you do a ppm, or how do you, should we not drink our water, or what?
So the question was, if we look at Hickory Hill as an example, is it safe to drink the water? All across Shelby County, it is safe to drink the water. Do not run out the door and buy a bottle of water. Go home, turn on the faucet, get out a glass, and drink it. It is fine. What this research is doing is it will keep us away from having to buy bottled water. That's what this is helping us do. So the water is safe to drink. Yes, ma'am. Hang on, Dan wants to add.
I just want to add one thing, and this is in support of MLGW, is that actually MLGW ensures that your water is clean. They test it on a regular basis. They produce the water, they test it to make sure. So they're here helping you out. So.
It sounds like you know the characteristics of where a breach may take place, and if that's the case, can you do something preventative to stop the breach from happening?
Okay, that's a very good question. We have ideas of what may have caused the breach, a very ancient river channel that scarred through the clay, or we're in the New Magic seismic zone, right? Remember the 1811, 1812 earthquakes? The issue of faults. There are some faults that could shift the units and provide a breach. So those are very old, and the breaches are very old. So they're not actually growing. They're not being produced right now. They are pre-existing. So right now, we are just trying to find them. Do you remember the photo with R.C. Graves when Bolin Hughes Ice Company, when he punched through the aquifer and shot up to the surface? Well, back then, the breaches still existed, but the Memphis Aquifer was pushing water up through the breaches. After the pumping that we've done over the last 100 or so years, it's turned around, and now the water's going down through the breaches. So the breaches have always been there. Yes, sir.
Based on the current consumption and projected changes in consumption, what is the 50-year prognosis for the whole thing?
That is a very good question, and that is one of the topics that we'll be exploring with the students that we have. I will say that we used to be pumping about 210 million gallons a day, and that seems like a lot. It is. Eastern Arkansas pumps 7 billion gallons a day for rice production, out of a different system for the most part. But what we've seen is that due to your conservation of water, truly, and the purchase of energy efficient machines, and that's you, Patrick, and other items, the water consumption is now 170 million gallons a day, and we actually see water levels in the Memphis Aquifer coming up, and that's a great story to tell. So congratulations, we're doing a great job conserving our water.
Hi, Brian.
Good morning.
As you know, in the last 6 months, we've been just attacked with all of these permits for landfills that are in floodplains and gravel pits, which we got some help from you guys on. Thank you very much. But there's a tremendous need in Shelby County for a large place for commercial landfill material. And there's not one. So what's happening is they're beginning to go and look at these places that are adjacent to the Wolf River. There are 2 coming up. Well, just 3 weeks ago, we finally fought off the one at Nutbush. We lost one at Shelby Oaks that we're still hopeful they will changed their mind about. But now there's two more behind Putt Putt Golf, which are, one is an old gravel mine and one is some other kind of lake. And they're beginning to push construction materials into those things, and they're directly connected to the Wolf River. And talk about your, feeling about that, and it just doesn't seem like a good idea. Doesn't pass the common sense test to me, but I wanted to ask.
Is my president here? I guess my comment would be that we are using the Wolf River right now as a proxy to finding new breaches. And we really don't know where they're going to be. You look at the situations that we have currently. TVA has coal ash. There's a breach underneath the coal ash pond. There is a custom cleaner site with large levels of contamination. The lady was getting headaches every day who lived there. Now there's a breach underneath that site, potentially. We look at the Shelby County landfill. It was put in back well before the 70s, closed even before the Clean Water Act, I believe, and there's a couple breaches there. So needless to say, we don't know where these things are, and I would say that if you're thinking about doing something, especially near the river, especially in the floodplain, you need to do a pretty detailed investigation like what we're trying to do here in order to know if there's a breach nearby. Things can be engineered, but if you go about it in a way that you're not really investigating the details, we see the surface, but we don't see the subsurface, it would be we need to rethink that.
During your presentation, when you were asking what citizens can do, I would like to suggest you add one more item to it. And that has to do with taking personal responsibility for taking the water with you, as opposed to the ubiquitous presence of bottled water everywhere. It's for our convenience, but what we need to do is we need to put some skin in the game and take our responsibility, buy a water bottle, and tell your friends about it. It's really important.
Right.
But we nailed two problems, the plastic and water.
No, it's a very good point. I've always told people if you have a plastic water bottle, its best use is to go fill it up at your faucet. That's the best use for it. So, very good. Thank you.
Okay, so Memphis 3.0. Is there anything in Memphis 3.0 that addresses the aquifer? That's my first question. My second question is, we get this wonderful water out of the ground and then we put fluoride in it. I'm not a betting man, but I would bet that the cost of fluoridation would pay for this project.
Okay, so two questions. I'll answer the first one first. Go in that order. Is, what was the Memphis 3.0. Sorry, I got stuck on the fluoride. It was going through my head. Memphis 3.0. Yes, I was on a chair of the committee looking at sustainability on Memphis 3.0, and our group really brought up a lot of topics pertaining to the aquifer, and not only just the aquifer, but also our streams. Doug McGowan talked, I think he may have mentioned it, you've seen in the paper about a freshwater institute in the area that we're looking to start up. It's really hard to be a freshwater institute in the area when you can't fish in any of your streams. So, we have a lot of streams on the 303D listing, which is just a poor stream, whether it's erosion or trash or something contaminated. So part of Memphis 3.0 is looking at how to get our streams back off the 303D listing. As to the second question about fluoride, no? No? Okay. I really don't know. I've not looked at the cost of fluoride. I've heard both sides of the story where, how fluoride may be pushed from certain industry and is fluoride good for your teeth, things like that. And I've heard both sides. I don't have a scientific opinion on it because I haven't investigated it. So that is actually beyond my kind of subject matter expertise. So sorry about that.
Along the lines of remediation, is there any, plan in this project for remediating that shallow aquifer? I know you guys mentioned InSafe does a lot of, you know, remediation in Memphis area. Would they be involved in that, or how does that work?
As far as any remediation goes, I would assume that would be, especially like the EPA site at Custom Cleaners. I mean, that's going to be remediated by their contractor. So I assume if we identify other sources that need to be remediated, that they'd go out to bid just like anything else. There's InSafe's one of many environmental consulting firms in town. So yeah, but I don't know if we actually get involved in the remediation because that's not really our area of expertise.
Yeah, so the models we create, I mean, when you looked at the one from Sophia from Mexico, she's trying to find conductivity and storage, those go into numerical models, and we can use those models to understand how contaminants move, and then you can go in and say, oh, let's pick a remediation scheme, let's see what it looks like. So at the university, we're able to do those tests, but we're just not construction people. So that would then go back to MLGW or EPA or someone else, some consulting firm, and they would use those results. But we can certainly help move in that direction.
Hello, right over here.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm known as Black Pearl, a United States veteran and a community activist and a survivor. I have a nosebleed, but I love our water. I want to make a statement. I travel a lot on my own and in the U.S. military. And we have some of the best water in the whole United States. And I just want to say, you all keep the good work up and keep our aquifer. Do all you can, keep it. And just keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. We will do it. Thank you. Go ahead. Up here.
Oh,
yes,
okay,
ma'am.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, ma'am.
I was listening to the gentleman right over there in terms of us as citizens putting skin in the game, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. But I was wondering, is there a real active campaign going on to make people continuously aware of how important the water is? And I think it's important that we keep in mind that we do want to leave good water for generations to come and not just for the right now. So is there something going on? Or, because a lot of times, and I'm thinking like California, where that was an extreme kind of case, but I don't think any of us want to get to that extreme if we can start doing things now to make a difference.
Right, so great question. Yes, there is a campaign that Caesar is pushing forward with Sarah and Michelle moving that. We are working with Memphis Light, Gas, and Water on approval of our education outreach campaign, where we are doing these 2 public forums. We are presenting in front of City Council. We're presenting in front of MLGW Board, but we want to do more. We want to be able to get out into the communities and to the libraries and everywhere to kind of discuss our water program and educate about our groundwater system and why it's so important to be involved and to understand the importance of its conservation.
Make sure you get to the schools, because it starts with our kids.
Yes, so we have a program called Water on Wheels. It's called the WOW Mobile, and it goes to schools. We take that all around schools. In fact, another thank you to International Paper, because they funded the WOW Mobile. So International Paper gave us a gift of $70,000, and we constructed the mobile museum, and we have been taking that to schools, and we are going to try to expand that by about 300-fold going out. So, thank you.
So if you're doing a teaser, send them our way. All right, we're going to have time for about 3 more questions. We have one in queue right here, and I have another one back here. And then if you have not asked a question yet,
Okay, it may have been an oversight on your part, but if you could share with the audience, I may have missed it, the financial resources or the human capital resources that MLGW and TVA are dedicating to the research and to this project.
So, one, MLGW has been supporting Caesar for the last 27 years, and they have been our largest supporter. Included with them is the city of Millington, the city of Bartlett, the city of Germantown, and the town of Carterville. So they have been stewards of our groundwater for a very, very long time. In fact, when I was still an undergrad, they were involved, and that was one of my first jobs at the university. So yes, they are, and through their support and through their public relations group, we are coordinating our education outreach with theirs, and therefore within MLGW, within their human capital, they are also conducting an education outreach program with us. So yes, ma'am. TVA, so I don't know of anything so far from TVA. They had expressed an interest in protecting our groundwater. We are trying to approach them about what that really means. So until we know more, that's all I have.
I have a question about contaminants.
Yes,
so
yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the shallow water aquifer has an increase in arsenic levels. So how concerned should we be about that? And then additionally on your map, you have all the dots of the breaches in the contaminant spots and the pink potential contaminant spots. Is it safe to live near those areas?
Okay, addressing the arsenic issue. The arsenic is in the shallow aquifer, and it is in an area where the movement of the water tends to go laterally. It doesn't go vertically there at that location. That's what our work is largely demonstrated, and the work with the U.S. Geological Survey last year when we put out that report. Addressing the second question, yes, there are lots of doubts, but those are only potential. Those are not confirmed, and there may be some that are confirmed, but there's a lot more doubts than there are existing contamination, and those individual dots may not reflect or do not reflect the size or of potential contamination there either. So the dots are just locators, just so you know where things are. And it's oftentimes a long way from wherever that surface location is down to our aquifer that we're utilizing, and it's important to understand this from the standpoint of vulnerability rather than to be absolutely concerned about a present danger.
Yeah, just about those points, those are points from EPA and as well as TDEC sites, the black points on there. So there's a varying degree of contamination at each one. There was some probably a leak, like leaking underground storage tank, and they excavated it out and then they deemed it clean. So that's one of TDEC's primary jobs, is to make sure that these sites aren't harming the public. So most of these sites have been cleaned and closed. There's other sites, like the bigger industrial sites that may have more extensive contamination. So there's ongoing monitoring, and all this is public information. You can submit a FOIA request to TDEC and then pull any of the data from those files or talk to the project managers of those specific sites.
So you're using the EPA's lists of spills and discharges and leaks and the NPL sites, and you're going to basically be investigating all those incidents?
So no, we're not going to investigate every single one. What happens is that gives us an idea of what has been in the area. Again, what we're seeing in the way of contamination is things that happened in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that have been in the system for a while and moving through it. So when we go to a particular site to investigate it, like a breach, we will use that data in order to better understand what could have happened in the past, and we'll target those specifically. But we're not going to go and investigate every single one of them. And Sarah, do we have one more question? Is that right?
I believe there's one over here, and then we've got one from one of our students, and then I'm gonna wrap it up.
Okay.
All right. I'd like to echo what the individual said. As a native Memphian, what you're doing is extremely important for our community, so thank you. My question relates to the survey methods. So could you expound a little bit on exactly what your methodology is, where you're going in the city, in the county? Are you considering socioeconomic strata? Are you what all, are your methods for choosing where you're evaluating and what you're evaluating?
Okay, so again, it was kind of more of a 4-step process, and I'll back it up to about 3 of them. First, we have ideas where there is potential breaches due to artifacts like the Mississippi River, the 5th largest river in the world, shifting across a system. You can imagine that it could have eroded through clay somewhere in there. So kind of those type of environmental factors that may suggest that there's a breach in the area. Another could be from, Caesar's been doing this piecemeal, as I said on the video, for 26, 27 years. So we've had students that have gone through the system and have investigated places. They've highlighted some stuff, but there's still some unknowns. So we'll target those and say, well, let's go learn some more. The one about Hickory Hill, that was a recent student of Dan's that just graduated that talked about that. And that's why we're going to deploy some instrumentation that we have in the back there right now. And then the other one is just hotspot areas. We identify the fact that there's a coal ash pond, and now there's a breach beneath it. We identify that there's a dry cleaners near the university, and now they drilled and there's a breach through it. And we have some research showing that it was there too. So it really is a suite of tools. There is no ABC. It's really complicated. These things are buried, and they're very hard to find. So we're trying a variety of things to really target finding them. Very good question.
All right, back here in the back. So we've been talking about what the people, the citizens can do to help not use so much water and be a good steward. But as you said earlier, we only pump somewhere around 150 million gallons per day for citizens. I think that's what you said. Whereas Arkansas pumps like 7 billion per day.
Yes.
So what is it that companies and large entities are doing? How are we regulating those companies that use so much more than we do to keep them good stewards?
Good question. Yeah. So there is not necessarily a regulation on how much people can pump. And what we are trying to do is to get everybody involved to where we recognize it's a shared resource. It's needed by the municipalities. It's needed by the agricultural community. It's needed by the industries. Industries bring jobs. We're smart people, all of us in the room, and we can figure this out. And by doing this type of work and bringing people to the table, we hope to answer those types of questions as to whether an industry that's a water user wants to stand up and do something. That's going to be on their shoulders to do that. Companies like International Paper, they use water elsewhere. They don't have a plant here, but their community is here. Their employee base, their larger employee base is here. They stepped up. They piped in, and they're giving an award with that. So that's what we hope other companies will do as well.
Thank you so much, guys, for your time. And thanks everybody in the room for sticking here until 8. We got a few little things to say. In your seat, there's a little survey, very brief. If you would please take a moment to fill it out with the bulk pencils provided. You can either leave them in your seat or under the registration table on your way out, drop them off. You can share with anybody that couldn't attend, and we'll continue to make this information public. So, thank you so much, everybody.